Welcome, action fans, and thanks for joining us for this edition of All 90s Action All the Time, as we complete our journey of looking at the highs and lows of action cinema in 1994. I'm your host, Scott Murphy, and today we are giving you a bumper episode just in time for Christmas, as we are doing our first action film face off. As you will know, it's common in Hollywood for two competing movies working on a similar theme or premise to come out in the same year. Some 90s examples include the two Robin Hood movies of 1991, the two Volcano movies of 1997, and the two Giant Asteroid movies of 1998. But we are not looking at those. No, today we are looking at one of the more bizarre clashes in cinema, I guess. The two skydiving based action films of 1994, Drop Zone and Terminal Velocity, which you'll probably already know from reading the title, well, before you listen to this podcast. Alongside me to talk about these two, we have none other than a very special guest, the host of Caged in Coppola Connections, the co host of Getting Dafoe You, and the editor of this very parish, Petros Patsilivas. Welcome, Petros, again.
Hello, Scott. How the devil are you?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm very well. I don't know if I'm like falling through the air. I don't know where I am. I don't know if I have hit myself terminal velocity.
It's good to start the puns early. That's what I
Hey, get the title in.
yeah.
I'm always a fan of a
Yes.
film that just gets the title in. I
Yes.
always remember that there was that craze for a while where like people would, as soon as they named like the title within the film, they would stand up, applaud, and then leave the cinema. I was like, do you know what? I I hate applause in the cinema, but I would give it a pass for somebody audacious enough to do that. Do you know what I mean? Like, especially if it's like
Yeah.
first 10 minutes.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's Oppenheimer. Yeah, meet Oppenheimer, right? Yeah. See you later.
I'm done. I'm done. I'm
Yeah,
out of here. I
I'm
have
out
to
of it in the first five.
I have to say there is a like I'm not sure about applause in the cinema, but I do remember I have been in cinemas where people have applauded the title coming, but not moved out. I mean, like you say, walking out the cinema, that is an audacious move. Uh, that is amazing. I have to say, sometimes it gets confusing with the applause in the cinema because I always have like a hangover from being at film festivals where you go to a lot of films and you're expected to applause at the end of the film,
Uh-huh.
and then you just go back to your normal cinema routine, and then you're like, go to applause, and then you're like, no, this is weird. Normally,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't normally do this, and then I'm like, okay, okay, I have to hold myself back and be like, no, 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 back to the normal routine.
Yeah, I'm the other way. Like I go to very rare like film festival screenings where I'm like, ugh, why are these people clapping? They're gross. And then I
Yeah,
look like the maniac. I'm like, oh yeah, shit, I should be clapping. Otherwise, I'm like Yorgos Lanthimos is not going to hear this from like Athens. Do you know what I mean? Like, come on, louder, louder, louder. Yes, we loved Poor Things. Yes.
that's true. I think that's why we do it, so they can all hear it. Like I'm sure when I was at the New Zealand Film Festival and saw saw the substance that Coralie Fargate was, it was like in France being like, yes, 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 New Zealand, they love me, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
That and I think film festivals are on a big like competition of who can clap the longest. Like the fact
oh,
there is like Wikipedia pages dedicated to like the longest can like applause, like standing ovations after films. It's like what have we become? What have we become as film fans?
I don't see. I don't know when this started happening. I don't know when. I don't know when like applause people started recording the length
Mm.
of applauses. I don't know when it started to become newsworthy. Like when I first became like a film nerd in like my mid-teens in the early 2000s, I don't remember it being a thing. So I think it's a thing that's appeared in the last kind of 10, 15 years. I'm not sure. It's very strange.
Mm. I think the thing I like heard about the most before I heard about like I knew that they applauded like at Cannes and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
the thing I think I'd heard about the most was like that like people would boo as well if they didn't like the film. And I think there's like a famous like Mark Commode story of like him watching The Idiots, and he like had to be
That's right.
evacuated because
Yes.
he was kind
Yes.
of like booing at the screen and like really upset, and they kind of dragged him out of the auditorium. If he's not added a bit of like pizzazz to that story, and he probably just shuffled out.
Yes, yes. I think possibly. He possibly did it as a bit of bizarre because, like, famously, Mark Kermode hates the Cannes Film Festival, um,
Yes.
and thinks it's just all a lot of not pretentious nonsense, and is more about glad handing than cinema. So that's his view. Don't come at us, Cannes. But we're not talking about films that are necessarily can worthy. We are talking about two nonsense '90s action films. Before we get into that, though,
Yes.
well, I think the last time you came on for Three Ninjas, we talked about your podcast, Caves and Coppola Connections, but you have
Hmm.
another podcast, Getting Dafoe You,
Yep.
which at the point that we record season 4 is not available, but by the time this comes out in December, it will probably be wrapped up. So you could tell us a little bit about season 4 of Getting Defoe You.
Season 4 is like the penultimate episode before the wheels totally come off the podcast, I think, because like to tease season 5 even before we finished season 4 in the kind of linear fashion of life, but it's already out if you're in the future when you're listening to this. Yeah, it's a fun roster of films. So off the top of my head, we are covering The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. We are covering Poor Things. They're going to be our season and opener and closer. We always like to kind of come in with a bang, get people in going, oh, I've heard of this one, and then kind of scatter throughout some films you've never heard of, or increasingly seem to be harder and harder for me and Daryl to find a copy of. I think one of the films we've covered this season, the name escapes me at the moment, but I think including our guest, there are 217 people who have logged it on Letterboxd. Um, yeah, it's a Joseph Conrad adaptation that Willem Dafoe was in 1996 with Sam Neill and Rufus Sewell, which is called, off the top of my head, let's see if I can find the name of this film. Google's really doing me dirty here. It's all right. The only person who's editing this is me.
This will be the best edited episode of the podcast. Can be assured.
Oh, it turns out they're in a couple of films together. The film is called Victory, which is that's one of our. We've got to cover this. We've got to get this out of the way. We also have The Great Wall making an appearance. Triple X, The Next Level, or State of the Union, depending on where you live in the world. Nightmare Alley is coming up. We also have Light Sleeper. Yeah, we've got a kind of bumper pack season coming up. And then, yeah, when we get to season 5, it's kind of like the most. Please just come with us on this one, guys. We kind of really like scattergun, like, let's do this. Let's do this really famous flop that Willem Dafoe was in. Let's do like let's do a load of art house films that he's in. Like with as per usual, we have like a real big banger to open the season. But then again, it is a film that a lot of people go, "Oh yeah, I forget that Willem Dafoe's in that." So,
Oh,
so
excellent.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. Me and Daryl like to see if each season has a arc in some fashion. Like, what are the connective tissue? And I think we have found out that season 4 of the podcast is Willem Dafoe's Lonely Man season. So even though we pick these films totally at random, just trying to span the decades of his career, we've managed to pick like a bumper pack of films where Willem Dafoe plays a series of lonely men, which is kind of perfect. I think, running throughout the season, it's just him getting increasingly more lonely, right up until the point of our season closer, where he's so lonely that he creates a woman to be his companion.
Wow. Yeah. Well, from the point of view of recording this, I'm looking forward to all that. But from the point of view of this coming out, I'm sure I've already enjoyed it. Oh, it was great. So the first movie that we're going to talk about today, we decided to do them in alphabetical order, and also Drop Zone versus Terminal Velocity. Just for some reason, sounds a little bit better than the reverse. So we're going to do Drop Zone first. Now, before we get into it, I'll do the stats. Drop Zone was released on the 9th of December 1994. It was directed by legendary journeyman director John Badham, who also directed the likes of Saturday Night Fever, War Games, Short Circuit, and Stakeout. The story was written by Tony Griffin and Guy Manos, who were professional skydivers who don't have really many other professional credits to their name. Well, the screenplay was written by Peter Barsocchini, who was probably most notable for going on to write High School the Musical, and it was the screenplay was also co-written by John Bishop, not the British comedian, whose most notable other credit is the Gene Hackman action film The Package. Critically, the film currently sits on 39% on Rotten Tomatoes based on 23 reviews. It doesn't have a Metacritic score. It's got an IMDb score of 5.6 out of 10 and a letterbox of 2.8 out of 5. And box office wise, according to Wikipedia, it made $62 million off a $45 million budget, which means it's probably didn't make its money back. But you never know. Maybe it did on VHS. So that's your stats for today. So first up, Drop Zone. Had you seen or heard of Drop Zone, Petros?
I had neither seen or heard of Drop Zone ever before, and I would say I wish it had stayed that way, but I'd be lying because the Drop Zone, despite having many foibles, was a lot of fun.
Yeah, right. I think maybe I guess I'm of an age. So a bit older than you. So I had seen Drop Zone before once many years ago. Both these movies, I obviously not talk much about Terminal Velocity at the moment, but I will say both of these movies are one of those kind of things that, as a kid, I caught them on like ITV at like 10 o'clock at night, and but I've not seen them since like the late 90s, or so I probably haven't seen them in either of them in like 25 years, which meant my memories of them were very sketchy. In fact, Drop Zone, I really didn't remember much about it at all, other than Wesley Snipes being in it, and weirdly, the end credits made it the way the end credits were stylized had somehow lodged in my brain, but there was
Yeah,
very little else about the movie that I'd really remembered.
the end
Yeah,
credits kind of look like a skydiving version of the Karate Kid poster with the kind of sun in the background, like you'd have Daniel doing the crane, but in this case, it's just people doing like well, it's women, isn't it, doing like some kind of sexy acrobatics, like
Yeah.
in the sun, just pulling shapes as they're, I guess, falling through the sky or just being lifted up by a big fan.
Pro- Probably the latter, I guess. Yes, it's like the kind of the closing credits are kind of like the opening credits of a Bond film, I guess.
Uh-huh.
But with skydiving. So, like, if you haven't
Let's
seen
go.
Drop Zone, but you are aware of Bond films, that's kind of, you get the impression.
And I
Um,
feel like if you've seen many other films, you've also seen Drop Zone. Uh,
so yes, it is. If you've seen a '90s action film, this is interesting. Like in terms of like the journey we've gone on in kind of 1994, because I feel like 1994 is the kind of end of an era.
mhm,
It's like because things start to change. Like things start to change in many ways. Post this, like 1994, we've already covered True Lies, which is Arnie's last kind of mega hit. We covered Speed, which kind of shows the transition to the kind of more everyman action heroes that had
uh-huh.
began with Die Hard, and also like the way this kind of film looks, that kind of overlit look, you start to get that kind of more blue look that in 95, when you get movies like Hackers and Johnny Mnemonic and these kind of things, that the latter half of the 90s kind of like a darker look.
Mhm.
Yeah, and also this the score of this movie is it's I think that's the tail end of that kind of bluesy guitar driven kind of score that is very popular, particularly amongst kind of buddy cop films
Yeah.
in the kind of late 80s into the 90s, and this is kind of the last year of that as well. So we're in a very transitional year in 94.
Some absolute, like, this film opens with just like, I noted this film opens with like shredding guitars. I
Yeah.
think an eagle, an alligator, and a prison. I was like, this can't get any more action movie if it wanted to be. Do you know what I mean? It's
So
like,
So the thing I noted about that, because I looked at some of the trivia for this movie, and and the rest of the movie I wouldn't say this is necessarily true of, but in the trivia it notes that the first person that was approached for this film was Steven Seagal, and the opening of this film is very Seagal, like with the blues guitar, with the eagle, with like all that. It's very Seagal, and I was like, yeah, I can see why this was initially. The rest of the movie, I'm confused by because it's like, yeah, I mean, Seagal. Like this is you're supposed to be like the hip movie. You're jumping onto the hip trend of skydiving. Like Seagal's already in his like 40s by this stage,
oh,
like
no
like
way
he's
Scout could do that.
I was like he'd be like 42 when this movie was made, something in that
No,
area. I'm like, not a chance.
no way. No way. I wonder what, like, because like the lead character in this film is Peter Nessip,
uh,
and Nessip is an anagram of Snipes. So I'm wondering what the anagram of like
Seagal.
Seagal would be, like legals or something. Do you know what I mean? Pete
Yes.
legals.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it'd be something like that. Yes. um, but yeah, no. So we're glad that it went to Snipes rather than Seagal. Snipes being, well, despite having his own problems, Snipes being both 10 years younger and a whole lot less problematic, and probably less of a headache for the director. Because when we did our Seagal season, god damn, both he just if he wasn't sexually harassing the female cast, beating up the stuntmen, he was also just giving directors just a major headache. So I'm sure everybody around was relieved that it was Wesley Snipes, who at this era seems like he was pretty okay. It was only later on in the kind of Blade Trinity era that apparently
Yeah.
he's very very kind of a pain to work with.
He was a sovereign citizen. That was why Scott is a sovereign citizen. He's a man unto his own rules.
I, absolutely, absolutely. So I feel like I think one of the issues of this film is like of the many issues is it can't quite up to its opening, because the opening of this movie, the opening 10 minutes, when we get this kind of in the prison,
Holy
we're
moly.
going to the prison, we're getting the escape from the plate. It's a pretty wild opening 10 minutes.
Oh, well, yeah, we start off with Michael Jeter's character, like, looking after some, like, cats that live in, like, a drain.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's going on here? And then I see one of, like, the most ingenious things I've ever seen. We see a like a boombox aerial shiv. I was like, let's go. What's happening here? We see an eagle kind of like ready to, it looks like it's going to pounce and protect Michael Jeter from being shanked at one moment, but it's just
Yes.
kind of just cutting back to the eagle. I was like, is this like supernatural in some capacity? Do you know what I mean? Like, he's protected by the eagles.
Yeah, I thought that this is what the movie was telling us, that nature was protecting Michael Jeter, but like he communes with nature, and therefore, like
Come, yeah. He's like Snow White. Do you know what I mean? He can kind of get the animals to do what he wants. They're putting out the laundry for him. They're protecting him from being shivved. But you're very right in the fact that, and I think I text you, like, saying I'm 10 minutes into this film.
yeah,
You said a set time frame on how long we would talk about this movie. I could use all of that talking about the first 10 minutes of this film, because the first 10 minutes well, not even that, like the kind of, in the first 5 you think, oh, all right, this film is going to be a man goes for, like, they have to transport this man from here to there. It's A to B. Do you know what I mean? Hijack movie, and then things go awry. But it kind of just sandwiches like a whole plot for a movie into, like, I don't know, an 8-minute sequence, if that. Do you know what I mean? Like, by the time we're off of the hijacked plane, it's like 13 minutes into the film, and it's like, well, that's a whole movie unto itself. Like, when we get to the final stages of the movie, it's like, well, that actually is a whole movie, and that movie is Die Hard. And then, like, the kind of midsection of the movie, I was like, we are basically watching a kids summer camp movie where it's basically like the ragtag don't know what they're doing, like, campers versus the, like, moneyed kids, but in a skydiving setting. Do you know what I mean? You've got Gary Busey and his posse, who are like the kind of all like the rich kids from the other side of the lake. And then you've got, Wesley Snipes, Yancey Butler, and a man who, I don't care what the actor's name is, he will only be referred to as Swoop. Just being absolute cards, getting into japes and having fun skydiving.
Yeah. I would have loved. I would have loved if they just totally dropped the whole action film bit, and they just, it was all about the skydiving competition in the end, and
that's what it feels like for a big chunk of this movie.
Imagine if Gary Busey and his team do a last minute face turn, Cool Running style of like, as Wesley Snipes nails it after learning how to skydive in a week. Yay!
Yes, yeah. I know one move. That's what he says. Like, do you? All the times we've seen you skydive, you've been shit.
Yeah, I love that line. Where like Yancey Butler's character basically says, no, you can't be part of the team. You have to be an alternate. There's only a week to the competition, and he's like, come on, I can get it. I can get it done.
Oh, I love it. He does get a baptism of fire into the world of skydiving, though, and I'm sure we'll get to that soon.
Yeah, fair enough. He sure does. I have to say, like, it is, yeah, it's a weirdly structured movie. So I was a bit disappointed because I did feel that like the Malcolm Jamal Warner character, who's his brother, like he had
Hmm.
pretty good chemistry with him. So it's kind of sad that he dies in like the opening 10 minutes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. He dies, and there's so many. I had so many questions about the plane heist,
Oh
like
yes.
because I think like there's a whole thing with like Gary Busey where like as he comes on the plane, he's obviously like playing a character. Like he's like, oh, I need a sedative. Like he's like asking these questions, like, oh, maybe this is a part of like the ruse. And it's like, no, that's kind of like that's nothing to do with it. Apparently, what they've managed to do is have force backs to the seats where they can just pull it down where you'd have the table tray, um, pull that down. They've got guns there. They've got they've got gas masks. They've got their parachutes red at the ready. I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, do you know what I mean? A minute ago, I thought Wesley Snipes was going to shag an air hostess, and now we know the plane is going down.
Well, yes, it does come on. It come on very quickly. What the thing about that scene is, it only gets more amusing as the film goes on because, like, one of my big notes was like, how did they smuggle all that? You know, how did they get all the guns in and whatever? And I know this is pre 9/11, and also it's an internal flight that security is a bit lower on, but like still, but there's a later scene where Wesley Snipes, character Peter Nessip is talking to like a military general, I think, and the military general says to him, "Yes, it'd be easy enough to smuggle those guns on the plane, but you couldn't smuggle the parachute rigs, with the metal rings, on, like you're like, oh, wait a second, it'd be easy enough to smuggle the guns on board. How? What? That seems like that seems like a weird throwaway line.
Hmm.
Yes, so it only gets more confusing as the movie goes on.
What I was disappointed with this film was I was hoping that later on we'd see, because when Pete's brother like dies, he's holding onto his arm. He's like, I got you, and he's just left with like he eventually like just falls out, but he's just left with his sleeve. I was gosh darn hoping at like a later moment in the film he'd pull out the sleeve and remember his brother, because I just found that hilarious. Like, oh fuck hell, just the sleeve's gone. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh no, if only I had better cotton, I would have been saved.
Well, I thought they were kind of like, I I thought they were kind of going to kind of do like a kind of mirror scene of that where he first meets Swoop, when Swoop kind of tricks him.
Yes.
So I thought he was going to be kind of re-traumatized, but it didn't. It just didn't play out that way. It just, in fact, the whole movie is kind of weird in many ways, but that's one of the ways it's weird because like there's not a lot of urgency. There's a surprising lack of urgency. It's supposed we're set up as this, it's like the grand revenge tale, the revenge for his brother, and also it's set up that he's like being traumatized by this, much like I don't know, much like the beginning of Cliffhanger, for example, which is it's like, oh, my, and like at least Stallone's character in Cliffhanger seems kind of traumatized by that event throughout the movie. Whereas
Yeah.
there's patches of this movie where you just forget about it, and then you're like, oh yeah, yeah, and his brother died. Yeah, oh, okay. But they're
Like,
just having too much fun skydiving.
there could have easily been a version of this film where we have that opening sequence, get a title sequence, and then have like a year later, and then something happens where like the Michael Jeter character is spotted, and that kind of like, do you know what I mean? He's gone.
Yeah.
He's down on his luck. Maybe he's kind of been fired as a U.S. Marshal, or like he's been demoted because he's kind of like hit the bottle or something like that. and then he goes into it. But instead, it's like a man who is deeply traumatized literally goes, just handed in my gun and my badge. I'm going to go home. I've got like, basically, I've got like a hacker's rig in my apartment. Start tip tap typing away on some computers and start the investigation. And I was like, what? And then obviously you've got like the whole thing where the FBI just immediately go, no, it's your brother's fault. He shot a guy, blew open the side of the plane. Nobody saw anything. All the survivors saw nothing. It was you two's fault. It's a good thing that your brother's dead. All the terrorists are dead. We found a finger, so Michael Jeter's character's dead. Case closed. And he's like, oh, okay. Like you would be perplexed. You would be grief stricken. Instead, he's like, that's it. Let's get to work immediately.
Yeah, same day, like next day, like next morning. Yeah. He's like, I'm on this. You know, don't worry. I'm investigating this. I'm going to get this sorted. Don't worry, guys.
If he is going through the 7 stages of grief, he has not had chance to get out of denial yet. Do you know what I mean? It's literally like stage 1. I'm sure as soon as the credits roll on this film, he's an absolute fucking mess because he's like, oh shit. He gets a realization again. My brother's dead. And I have fucking like, I'm probably going to jail because what I've done is deeply illegal. All of this stuff. I'm basically like vigilante justice, like been doing all this fucking illegal shit, but it's fine.
It's all good. Like, I don't know, man. You know, like, but I mean, I'm sure they'll let him off with it. He'll breeze in his cool cream suit and his dark glasses, and like they'll be like, yeah, all right, fair enough,
Yeah,
fair. Yeah, you do you, Nessip.
Yeah. Where's your car? Don't worry about that. I ride a motorbike now.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess like maybe we should get into some of the other people who are in this movie. We talked a little bit about Gary Busey as a villain doing. I think like we should because you do a Nicolas Cage podcast. Gary Busey is very much the actor that people think Nicolas Cage is.
Oh, yeah. Like a certifiable madman in reality is kind of like, is always turned up to 11, has like probably like the biggest shit-eating grin on screen, only rivaled by his own son Jake.
That is true.
Like more teeth than a shark. Like you're kind of like blinded when he comes on screen because it's just like all these teeth, and like he kind of this feels like him just cashing in a check from playing Mr. Joshua in Lethal Weapon. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I've only been offered this because of that. Fuck it, let's do it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, no, absolutely, because he has. I mean, this is weirdly the second movie we covered this year, where Gary Busey is part of the villain team, because he was in a movie called Surviving the Game, and
Oh,
like,
I've watched it, love it, love Surviving the Game.
yeah, so. Yeah, I mean, surviving the game is truly spectacular. When you have a villain gang that involves Rutger Hauer, John C. McGinley, and Gary Busey, that's just. I mean, how can
Just
you resist?
throwing F. Murray Abraham just for a bit of fun as well. The conflicted villain, but still a villain.
Still a villain. Still an absolute terrible dad. Yeah, so he did a bunch of these. Because obviously he is one of the villains in. He's the secondary villain in Under Siege, as well. So like I do, yeah, I feel like post Lethal Weapon, he did like he just kind of cruised on that kind of villain persona.
At least here he's the head villain. He's
Oh,
not the
that is
side
true.
villain anymore.
That is true. That's true. He's been promoted from sec- he's been promoted from secondary villain because most of those films and the other 3 films we mentioned there, he's a secondary villain. He is not the head villain. So yeah, he's been promoted in villain school, and maybe that's what attracted to him to this role. Um, Yeah, I have to say, like, I'm not. I wasn't all that impressed. I mean, like saying, with surviving the game, it's a great villain gang. They're all great. Whereas in this film, not so much. I mean, like obviously, everybody's favorite Latino henchman, Robert Lasardo, is in it. So like that's cool. But like, I like, yeah, the villain gang overall, I didn't love it.
Yeah, yeah. Robert Lasardo playing Deputy Dog, which is an
Yes.
absolute great. Like, yeah, you got Luca Berkovici as Jaeger. It feels like, and the film sets this up quite early, that all of the kind of villain gang, apart from Busey, are expendable to
Yeah.
some degree. Do you know what I mean? And he even says that himself, like when, and it's quite, yeah, like that scene where he like the net is closing in potentially on their gang, and like the guy who is the kind of like the bum note, as it were, like just gets taken out and like put into the power lines. It's pretty like, for like menacing villain shit. It's like that's pretty like, oh, you see what this guy is about, and that he is like, I will. All of you are expendable because I'm like I'm doing what I'm doing,
Yeah.
irregardless.
I didn't know. I didn't quite know how to. I mean, it didn't make much sense to me, that scene, in a sense of like, I get it because this is the sort of scene that happens often in action movies where the lead villain kills off one of his gang just to prove how ruthless and cold blooded
Mm,
and villainous he is. That's fine. But yeah, we've it's kind of been set up that the Jaeger is like the best skydiver, and
yeah.
like, so it seems like a bit of a crazy move to take out your best skydiver on your skydiving mission. And also, the edge is really taken off like how cold blooded it is, because he like guides him into the power lines, and his death is like the most Looney Tunes version you can
Yeah.
picture in your head of that death of somebody going into a power line.
Just their whole plan as well, right? Like the fact that they've kidnapped this guy who is a hacker, the Michael Jeter character. They kind of have these like nefarious plans to hack into systems of the FBI, the DEA, whoever they want. Um, and the way that they will do it is to parachute onto the top of these buildings and get in. Which, like, when they do their final heist, it's like, well, why did you need? Well, they explain like the no-fly zone, but how are they getting away with the earlier heist? Like, I'm sure people are going to see 4 or 5 parachutes in a city
in
center.
a in a cityscape. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. I kind of was like, yeah, this is a bit kind of crazy. I mean, like you say, the final one makes sense because there's lots of people there's a
Yeah,
big competition. There's lots of people skydiving, so people are expecting skydivers to be in the air when they look up. Whereas, most of the times, if you just look up and you're like, "There's a skydiver," they'd probably be, that's kind of random. Also, like, they're trying to hack in to get a list of like the undercover identities of various kind of DEA and law enforcement agents. So it's kind of like the Mission Impossible thing. It's kind of like the knock list.
yeah,
So like, yeah, they're trying to get this, and apparently it's in this very very secure place, where they keep it and they have to skydive in. But in that final sequence, it seems like the whole headquarters of the DEA is being secured by 3 inept guards.
yeah, yeah. Two having a conversation about Star Trek, where like I'm pretty sure one of them like turns to the other and is like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" Like I'm paraphrasing here, but
Yeah,
it's basically like an audience surrogate. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like they're all wearing wigs, man. They're all wearing wigs. Like that's Spock. He's got ears on. What? Like what the fuck are you talking about? And then yeah, you got you got the woman who just like everything is like, you want to order pizza? Like, I'm hungry. And then like the next scene we see her just making like the fattest sandwich I've ever seen. And it's like,
Oh yeah.
go up to floor 27. It's like, oh. As she exits the kitchen, she says, "I'll see you later," to the fridge. It's like, what the? Who are these bozos? Do you know what I mean? These DEA agents? Like, it feels like they've contracted out the security of the DEA to some bumbling morons.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we got like you say, we have one female guard who really cares more about our sandwich than securing anything, and two male guards who, yeah, just like talking classic television, retro. In this particular case, the Star Trek, the original series. And there's really no other security, not that we see. Obviously, the budget did not allow for anything else. Which is surprising because like it had, I mean, a decent size, but I mean, 45 million. That's pretty. For
Well,
94.
considering like Nakatomi Plaza was a building that was under construction, seemed to have a bit more going on for it. Do you know what I mean?
True,
And
yeah.
an excuse as to why it might be like a skeleton crew, because it is like a Christmas party. Do you know what I mean? It's after hours, not much going on. Like one guy on the front desk. This film, like, and it is like the elephant in the room. This film is like Point Break meets Die Hard, right? With a load of like uh yeah, a load of summer camp kids comedy thrown in the middle, which is very bizarre.
That's how they pitched it. They were like, this is going to be this is this is going to be like Die Hard meets Point Break meets don't
Meatballs.
meatballs. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So perfect. Yeah, and they were like, yes, get that movie, and it's got skydiving as well, which is hip right now in the airline industry. Um, that's I'd love to think that like these two movies got made because some Hollywood executives saw Point Break and they just saw that last sequence and they're like skydiving. That's why people like this movie. That's why people are into this. Let's
Yeah,
make
yeah.
movies just all about that.
That or somebody got it, like got a tandem skydive. Couple of execs got it for
Yeah.
like a. Do you know what I mean? It was the retreat that year. It was the Paramount like summer bash. Yeah, come on, guys, you can go up. You can do a skydive. Like, let's get it. And they said, what? They're doing that for their summer social. And then the people at another studio, the Terminal Velocity guys went,
Oh,
we're missing. Do you know what I mean?
oh
Buena
yes,
Vista. Yeah, we're missing out on the action. Like, let's fucking get involved.
yeah. Terminal Velocity was Hollywood Pictures, which was Disney in disguise. It was like the Disney films that they made for kind of slightly older audiences. So they wanted to kind of fool people into thinking it's not Disney, so it's Hollywood Pictures. So yeah, obviously, both Disney and Paramount obviously did some skydiving for their summer holidays that year. That was the workday away for both of those studios.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, and like I think part of we should cover obviously that this isn't a great film, but I I do feel like part of my enjoyment of this movie, as we discussed, is just how 90s it is.
Oh,
It's the overlit look. It's the bluesy guitar score. It's the fact that like if listeners are not quite aware of how exactly 90s this movie is, in this movie there is a skydiving montage soundtracked by a song by Toad the Wet Sprocket, forgotten grunge era band. That's how 90s this movie is.
oh yeah. There were like so many moments throughout this where I was like, I am kind of enjoying this. I think like there's a like some of the stuff at the bar, like I think like Wesley Snipes quite early on, like sits at the wrong table and like he gets into a fight, and then there's like a sequence of events that lead to a fight in the toilet. One of them being, which is essentially like manslaughter, where Swoop covers a man in his parachute, and like the judges are not horrified in any way. They just go, "It looks like he's giving him a gift wrap," and it's like, no, it looks like he could potentially kill a man.
Yes, I did love that they just treated it as like this is a special move, and everybody was cheering it on. Everybody was
Yeah,
like, "Oh, well done, well played, sir." You know, like
yeah, and that's when it felt at its most like summer camp comedy, when it's
yeah,
like kind of like the guy who's done it, who's like the number two of the gang, just kind of like looks back over his shoulder like, I'm gonna get you, and then like later on it's like you've got the Swoop goes to the toilet and they're like, let's get him, boys, and they like go after him, and then we got Wesley Snipes outside doing like a little funny piss dance as well, like, oh man, I really gotta go, and then like just like makes his way in and beats the shit out of them, which is a great fight sequence. I think
oh yeah,
anytime
yeah.
this was doing like close quarters combat, it's quite fun and like kind of like inventive. Like I love a good like strip lighting, getting like slammed down on someone. He does that at some point. I'm pretty sure he grabs like the big hillbilly guy by the beard and like uses that as leverage to just start smacking him in the face. Someone ends up getting like smacked into a toilet cubicle. It's all great stuff.
Yeah. No, it is great stuff. And I have to say, like I'm a I always have to kind of ward myself off from booking too many martial art movies for these seasons because I'm a big fan of martial arts films. So like I love when Wesley Snipes get to show off his martial arts in the kind of two sequences or couple of
Mhm.
sequences he does. Oh no, there's the end fight with Robert Lasardo. So like, I guess like there's kind of three mini bits. And like I felt like that was very summer camp movie as well. Like the other fight that happens before that, where there's like a team skydiving team who
Mhm.
try to take Wesley Snipes' seat at the bar. He's just sitting at
Yeah.
the table, and there's like, "I guess you didn't know that's our table," and
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
"Yeah," you know.
Yeah, you always expect someone to do an eye poke, and then like they go like that. They go like the hand between the eyes, and then someone comes in with the two fingers and gets them. It all kind of is a bit like, do you know what I mean? Table smashing, a bit like
Yeah.
Three Stooges, a bit like, should have some sound effects and stuff like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think like the other thing that like leading up to the bathroom fight, I did think it was very amusing that, as you said, Swoop did this incredibly dangerous move that could have killed a man, and yet everybody loves it. And when they first go into the bar, everybody stands up and applauses, and there's everybody's like,
Yeah,
"Yes, Swoop, he's a man."
yeah. Other things I liked, but I thought Yancy Butler very good. Apart from the fact that she is cast alongside, is it Claire Stanfield?
Yes,
They do look interchangeable in the
they
way
do.
they look. Is
They do.
is a very kind of like archetypal early '90s like tough woman. Do you know what I mean? Could like it's like okay, like
Yeah.
but yeah, she's a lot of fun in the bits. And one thing I found like I don't know, a bit perplexing about the film, and I think it
Mm.
probably does come down to like Hollywood's attitude to race, especially in the '90s, that there is like amazing chemistry between her and Wesley Snipes, yet they like 100% are like they cannot have any like romantic interest in each other, even though we've set up at the beginning of this film that Wesley Snipes is kind of unlucky in love. Like it feels like that could be like a kind of like pay, like some kind of payoff in this movie. Do you know what I mean? Like
It could
his
be,
brother
and
is like,
it could. I mean, it could speak to the horrible racial politics of the time and like interracial couples.
Yes.
We're
Well,
not often
so-
seen on film at that time outside of like Spike Lee movies or whatever. Um, you know, so it could speak to that. But if we were being generous to the movie, part of the trivia was that Yancey Butler's character Crossman was originally written, the part was written for a man, and then like it got retooled because
Ah,
it got retooled, and like there were certain elements of it that they were going to retool, that Yancey Butler actually, you know, actually made a stand and was like, no, I want this to happen. For example, there's a scene where Wesley Snipes does his first his first jump, that he does against his will, which kind of seems illegal, but like this movie skates over that. So when he does that first jump and he falls in the water and then he gets up and he punches her, that was the execs wanted that taken out of the script because like the role changed from a man to a woman. But Yancey Butler was like, no, no, just no. I want to keep that in. Just because I'm a woman doesn't mean you can't have that scene.
yeah, yeah,
So it's possibly because of that there's no romance in the film. So if we were being generous to the film, but it could be a mixture of both.
yeah. It feels like it would have been an easy solve to have that, where it's like, oh, he's a guy who's been set up on all these horrible dates in the past,
Yeah,
and he's like, he's like a kind of like, I just want a plain Jane, and then the kind of like karmic irony at the end of the film is he kind of does find some like love and affection in like the polar opposite to that. Do you know what I mean? He kind of like makes comments about the people he's been hooked up with being into like very out there things, and then like him kind of like, or yeah, finding kinship with somebody who is a skydiver. Do you know what I mean? Like kind of like
yeah,
one
no,
of the
absolutely.
most extreme things. It would have been like a kind of, I don't know, a very Hollywood payoff, but like would have been kind of,
I think it would have worked as well, and I wouldn't have been against it. Certainly in this film, because I would say that like there's a lot of action stars, like be it Arnie or Sly or Dolph Lundgren or Vin Diesel, all these kind of guys who very rarely have good sexual chemistry with any of their
yeah,
romantic leads. But Wesley Snipes is in that is in that other category, that of action stars who do sexuality. Van Damme, yeah, Antonio Banderas, Pierce Brosnan, Jason Statham. They can all do. They generally have like good
yeah,
sexual chemistry with their leading ladies or whatever. So I would have been for it in this case. Where often I'm like, yeah, it doesn't need this romance.
yeah, yeah. One of the things that kind of like blew my mind in this film as well, just because I think anytime she pops up in a film, I'm kind of like, what the hell is going on here? Is Grace Zabriskie playing
I was going to
the
mention
pilot
that. Yeah,
for,
and
for
his
Yancey
Zabriskie.
Butler's kind of rinky dink like skydiving operation? And it's like, what's Sarah Palmer doing here? What's going on?
Yes, both of these movies have random cameos from kind of interesting, intriguing kind of people. So like it is. I also was the same because I remembered very little about this movie. So when Sarah Palmer, as she'll always be known, Grace Zabiskie, obviously her real name, pops up, I'm like, oh yeah, what? And she's very fun in the movie. I kind of wish there was more of her being the kind of cranky, kind of slightly eccentric, pilot in
Yeah.
her beat up plane. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, like the stuff she gets at the end where she's like, like when they're like trying to make the like move to get Yancy Butler's character as she's hanging off the side of the plane because she was double dared by. I keep calling him Gary Busey, but like considering Wesley Snipes' character is Pete Nessip, which is a pretty weak like
Yeah.
character name, I think, for like an action lead.
It's not great, is it? It's not great. It's not like John Matrix or anything, is it? Yeah.
Gary Busey's name is Ty Moncrief, which is a fucking wicked name.
Yeah, Time on Cree's pretty good. Yeah.
That's your action. That's your action lead, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, that is a better name. Nessup is just I don't like Nessup is like the name of like I don't know like a lawyer in a courtroom drama or something. Like like it's not an action
Yeah,
lead.
that or like a kind of like a late night drink that helps you get to sleep. Do you know what I mean? Have a cup of Nessip before bed. I mean, like I don't know, like an Ovaltine kind of thing.
Yeah,
Horlicks.
yeah.
Ah, Nessip. Like,
He does an ad for it at the end of the movie.
ah, yeah, yeah. How do you sleep at night? I sleep with a Nessip.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah. Apart from Nessa, like the rest of the names are they're pretty decent. You know, you got the Skydiver, Don Jagger. We talked about Deputy Dog, Ty Moncrief. Yancey Butler's name's Jesse Crossman. Quite like that. That sounds
Yeah.
like the name of a wrestler or something. You know,
Yes.
like
100.
so yeah, no, the other names they just failed on the lead, but the other names they kind of nailed it.
Yeah, they got a guy just called Juice. I think that's the
Yeah,
hillbilly guy
yeah,
who's on.
he's the hillbilly guy with the big grey beard. Yeah. Looks like an extra from Sons of Anarchy. Also, we we should mention we should mention that on the good guy team, one of the members of the good guy team is Rex Lynn, and he's not playing a cop or an FBI agent, which blew my mind.
Yes.
So a very rare non-law enforcement Rex Lynn in this movie. So
Who
there you
who
go.
who only feels like he is there to pay off one of the final moments of this film. Because when they kind of go about their like trying to infiltrate the DEA going after Ty Moncrief's gang,
Mhm.
he is just there to be shot so it will keep Swoop on the roof. So
Yes.
when it comes to the final moments when Earl Leedy, Michael Jeter's character, is escaping, that Swoop can literally swoop in and
Yeah.
save the day because Nessip is out of action and can't go after him.
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem weird as well. It seems kind of weird that Rex Lynn is part of the gang because we're trying to portray, skydiving culture as kind of young and hip, and Rex Lynn has already lost his hair, and like
Yeah,
I like, already looks. I mean, I don't know how old he was in the film, but he already looks about 45. Yeah, it's a bit random, but his presence is yeah, it's a decent presence and
maybe,
like even if he is a plot device.
maybe Rex Lynn is like who's the guy from Beverly Hills Cop, and it always kind of like
Oh,
absolutely.
John Ashton, is that his name?
Yes, John Ashton.
Yeah,
Like, and
right.
it always kind of makes my skin shiver to realize like I'm a similar age to John Ashton in Beverly Hills Cop. Like, I feel like the man just aged really quickly and then stayed looking 55
Oh
for
yeah,
about 30 to 40 years.
yeah,
Like, you get to that new Beverly Hills Cop film, it's like, he doesn't look that much older.
yeah, yeah. No, I know what you mean. And some people age differently back in the day, and I think certain types of people age differently as well. Like for example, I am a fan of wrestling, and when you look at a picture of like, if you look at a picture of like Hulk Hogan from 1993, and then recognize that he's only 40, and you're like, is he? That's amazing. Yeah, no, I guess uh, people age differently. People age
Yeah.
differently. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, yeah, I think that we'll kind of wrap up for now. Drop Zone. We will obviously come back to Drop Zone in the third part of the episode. Yes, there's three parts to this episode. We'll start to seg you into Terminal Velocity, and then we'll come back to Drop Zone as we compare and contrast both movies in part three. But that's the end of part one. Now on to Terminal Velocity, which was released on September the 23rd, 1994. It was directed by Darren Sarafian, whose most notable other movie credits include the Jean Claude Van Damme film Death Warrant and the Christopher Lambert, Mario Van Peebles effort Gunman that we covered previously on the podcast. Although Darian Serafian has directed a whole lot of television, including 23 episodes of House, which he's also an executive producer of, but he's also directed just, tons of different TV series. That was written by David Toy. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce his name, who's most famous for writing all of the Riddick movies, but was also a writer on The Fugitive, G.I. Jane, and Waterworld. Critically, this currently sits on 16% based on 25 reviews. It has no Metacritic score. It has a 5.5 out of 10 on IMDb, and it has a 2.7 on Letterboxd. And box office wise, it made 47 million off of a $50 million budget, which makes it definitely a flop. But again, maybe it made its money back on VHS. Who knows? So, had you previously seen and or heard of Terminal Velocity?
I think I'd heard the name Terminal Velocity, but I'd never seen Terminal Velocity. But again, I'm glad I've watched it, because like there is a lot in this that is kind of like scratches an itch that I have for like movies. And I think like with both of these films, I feel like now I can kind of like talk a little bit about both of them at the same time. Not going to compare and contrast just yet, but I do like the thing, and it might be the fact that recently I've got very into like listening and like watching stuff about the Kennedy assassination. So like anything where it's like kind of like, oh, what's going on? There could be a conspiracy. Do you know what I mean? And like the way the early elements of this film play out, and I kind of thought about this as I walked home from work today. I was like, there is like a point early on in this film where it's like it could go the way it goes, or it could be like a paranoid thriller a la Blowout, and decides, nah, we're going balls to the wall. Action movie, baby. Do you know what I mean? Like it kind of like starts off as like a man in over his head trying to prove his own innocence, to like all types of shit is being thrown at the fan.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. I do think that there is a part of this film, the structure of this film is in some ways structurally similar to like a lot of those kind of Hitchcock thrillers, like the 39 Steps and North by Northwest and stuff like that. So it definitely, even though it goes off in its own direction and it's does its silly 90s action thing, there's definitely a kind of underlying element of like that kind of Hitchcock thriller structure to it.
Yeah. This kind of like, I think if Drop Zone kind of is like an out and out 90s action film, this kind of is creeping into like the action thriller territory somewhat, in like the kind of like, I don't know whether it is like the kind of like a lot of it is set at night. Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas Drop Zone, so I'm confusing the titles. Like Drop Zone is a lot of like bright daytime. Do you know what I mean? Whereas this is a lot of like kind of like shady deals in like junkyards at night and like kind of creeping around and like, so I don't know. I found myself like both of these films. as I said, not particularly good, but I found myself having a lot of fun. And it might be recency bias, but this one I was like kind of watching it going, kind of digging what this is serving me.
Yeah, yeah. I think like I mean, this movie starts in the most ridiculous style um of any movie. Um I think like with that opening scene where like with you know how like he swoops in what to what he thinks is a bachelorette party, but it's actually a party for a young girl called Bernadette. Um and I think like one of the movie's kind of semi charms and also one of the movie's kind of most outdated elements as is that it has a lot of Roger Moore era Bond's humor, I would say,
Uh huh.
throughout the movie. There's a lot of, and I I don't know if that is like to suit Charlie Sheen's persona because like can't imagine some of the lines that are delivered. Like apparently the original director and star for this movie was going to be Kevin Reynolds, who did Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and went on to do Waterworld, and Tom Cruise. Now
Yeah.
I kind of get Tom Cruise in the role because it's kind of in his wheelhouse of like an arrogant maverick who gets his ego dented and then has to like build his ego back up, kind of thing. You know, like that he did in Top Gun and Cocktail and Days of Thunder and all those kind of movies, you know, like so that seemed to be the classic structure of a Tom Cruise character. But like, I don't know, I can't imagine him delivering the kind of now kind of outdated, kind of cheesy sexual innuendo one-liners that end up in this movie. And
Not
my
even
one,
innuendo. There is a line in this
no,
film
that's true, that's true,
where
that
she
is true.
refers to him as a talking penis. He's like, I'm not just a talking penis, I'm a flying penis. And I would be a liar if I said I did not laugh at that line.
Oh, I would also, as corny and terrible as that line is, yes, no, I laugh too. I gotta say, I gotta say, yeah, yeah, no, it's because it's such a ridiculous line. Yes,
Mhm.
she says to him while they're in the plane together before they're supposed to do the skydive. You know, I would be an idiot to trust my life with a walking penis. And then he hits back with the like, I'm not just a walking penis, I'm a flying penis, which is, yeah. I'm sure David Toy was very proud of himself when he wrote that line. He was like, "Oh, this writing day is done. I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to walk away from the computer and for the moment."
Clicked those knuckles, kind of like shifted his arms back and went, spun in his chair and went, taking the day off. Yeah. There's like, because you say about the opening of this film, but like
Yeah.
the true opening of this film is like borrowing from like the Lethal Weapon handbook, right? Where
Mm.
like you've kind of got a woman, as an audience, we're unsure what is going on. Like she's unsure what is going on because out of nowhere, a plane, like, but it basically lands on top of her car, and then she's calling her roommate, and then inexplicably, Christopher McDonald, sporting a like bleach blonde do, comes in and just absolutely like beats seven bells of shit out of her and drowns her in a fish tank. I was like, what's going on?
What? Yes, one of the true one of the true joys of this movie is our lead villains are Tony Soprano and Shooter McGavin, which is
Oh,
just amazing. I had totally forgotten. Yeah, there were certain scenes that I kind of remembered, but I had totally forgotten that they were the villains, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing."
and that's the thing. Like you mentioned, yeah, you mentioned Tony Soprano, James Gandolfini. Like even in that's what I mean. Even in something that is kind of like middle to lower of the road fare, like really showing his chops. Like kind of like I bought into the whole like is it Ben Pinkwater, like the kind of like
Ben Pinkwater is kind of DA kind of
alias he goes
alias.
by. Yeah, like sniveling. He's kind of always got like an inhaler in it, like kind of Vicks inhaler up his nose. He's kind of always like I don't know, like he's allergic to dust and stuff like that. It's kind of,
Oh,
and then that kind of heel turn to kind of use a wrestling term is like kind of like I was shook. I didn't know that was coming. I was like, wow, this is great.
yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think that yeah, he really commits to this role. And like you say, this is obviously, presumably like a kind of paycheck movie for him. He's just a jobbing actor. He's like, yeah, fine, fine, I need to make ends meet. I need to pay the rent this month, whatever. But like, but he really commits to the part. And like you say, he commits to the two sides of it, of like playing this kind of nerding it up as this kind of
Yeah,
assistant DA, that's supposed to be prosecuting this case. And then, when he like is unmasked as the Russian gangster that he really is, then he like has great fun kind of hamming it up that
yeah.
way. Uh,
Character
yeah,
like Christopher McDonald, like, why the fuck are we bringing this car with us to Russia? Like, get this fucking shit out of here, like, kind of thing. Like, and that's the thing. Like, again, he might have a similar thing to Gary Busey, where it's like, I was in True Romance. I kind of got to play like the side henchman. It's like, it's my chance to like put on my big boy pants and be the lead villain in a piece. I imagine for an actor, especially like
yeah,
someone like James Gandolfini, up until like the kind of early 90s, was like just a stage actor, wasn't he? Like, not
yeah.
just a stage actor, that kind of diminishes stage acting, but like to kind of go into like Hollywood filmmaking, like acting, and then being like, all of these villains have got to be a lot of fun to play, especially something like this where you are kind of doing like a pullback and reveal of like yeah, I'm like a supporting like kind of aid to the lead, and then all of a sudden it's like, I'm the fucking big bad, baby, let's go.
And I do think that like the, and maybe this is the influence of like Tarantino starting to come into kind of mainstream Hollywood movies, but I do quite like that they kind of give the villains kind of little quirks, like the fact that Christopher McDonald's like into classic cars, and like you say, he says like, why are we taking this, and then he gives like a kind of mini monologue of like, oh no,
Yeah,
it's like, this is a Cadillac Watson, and it's an American classic, and it gives a little bit of detail about the car, and it turns out that he's like a car nerd, like I
yeah.
think like those kind of small details can liven up, what is a pretty meat and potatoes kind of action thriller.
I'm just reading here. You mentioned Tom Cruise earlier could have starred in this film. Another
Possibly, yeah.
person who passed was Michael Douglas.
Yes, I read that as well. Yes, yeah. Which seems, again, again, I'm not sure. I mean, I get the Tom Cruise. I get why they would look at Tom Cruise and be like, "This is kind of in his wheelhouse." I don't get Michael Douglas at all. Um, unless all the sexual humor was still in it, and they were playing it on that of like, well, we know Michael Douglas can be effectively sleazy, but like the whole, I don't. No, I just wouldn't buy Michael Douglas as this character. I don't. And also, again, maybe the age thing as well. Michael Douglas would be like nearly 50 at this stage, I think, or around
Yeah,
50. Yeah,
Michael
like
Douglas is one of those like perpetually like 50-year-old blokes as well, isn't he? Like
yes,
he's always seemed like he's 50. Like,
yeah, 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 yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. But I think he would, because I think he was early 40s. Because I think he's about 80 now, so I think he would be about 50 when this was made. Um, so yeah, I don't. Could you imagine Michael Douglas in this role? Can you picture it?
no, not at all. I think that's the thing. I think like somebody like Charlie Sheen is kind of perfect casting because
Hmm.
whereas Drop Zone, like Wesley Snipes, kind of, I think does, even though he is playing this like modern style of action hero in the kind of like not really superhuman in the way that we do have with like the old guard of the Arnold Schwarzeneggers and Stallones and stuff like that, even like Van Damme to some degree as well, and the such. Like, Wesley Snipes kind of like does straddle that line where he could easily be one of those guys, but he's playing this kind of, especially like 1994. He's almost got to play like the roles that Keanu was playing, like Charlie Sheen in this, and like Nicolas Cage would go on in like
Yeah.
uh The Rock and stuff like that, like the kind of slightly nerdy guy who like kind of is in it over his head. Whereas Charlie Sheen in this, I feel is perfectly cast to be this guy who like is, and I think it's said in the film, is basically a stooge. And it's like, yeah, he fits that perfectly. Get old Carlos Estevez in. Like he can play a stooge with his eyes closed.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think like yeah, that's one of the things I was going to talk about and I wanted your opinion on. Like what overall do you think of like Charlie Sheen's performance? Because I think like a lot of reviews I saw, this got generally pasted by critics, and a lot of the critics brought up hot shots and said that like this performance doesn't seem all that dissimilar from Hot Shots, but it's like a kind of it's like Hot Shots, but if they made it serious and they didn't realize it was a comedy. Like there was a lot of Hot Shots references, and there was a lot of sniffiness about Charlie Sheen's performance. But yeah, what were your thoughts on that? Or and did any of it seem parodic to you? In the way that it seemed to critics in '94.
I think I'm lucky in the fact that I'm kind of like, and I can kind of see where those critics coming from, because obviously
Mm,
you only kind of view films in the kind of like time in which you're seeing them, right? So for me, like, I'm not having seen this off the back of like, no, like, do you know what I mean? Like in 94, where like the lasting memory of Charlie Sheen at that moment is like what Hot Shots Part 2, which was like the year before, which was like
yeah.
the big thing, and then we're going straight into this. So I could kind of take this film on its own merit and not
Mm,
kind of have that cultural baggage of that film. And I just thought, like, for the guy that he is and the kind of like knowing the landscape of like what action movies were doing at the time and
mm.
casting these kind of like unlikely action heroes, I thought, yeah, I thought he was generally good in the film. Like, there's nothing that stands out to be like, I don't know. A lot of it is just like the script is a bit hokey at sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like, he is kind of playing a bit of like a, I don't know. I'd say, yeah. The only thing is he's kind of not as wisecracky as he probably should be for like the way that we see he is at times. Do you know what I mean? Like him willing to do this like skydive and then reveal that he's got like arseless leather like chaps on and stuff like that. It's like you'd expect this guy to be a lot more fun. Do you know what I mean? But like then again, he is put under immense amount of pressure because he believes within like the first 10 minutes of this film that he has like either wholly responsible or partly responsible for a woman falling to her death. So like you can kind of, I don't know, forgive the guy for having a bit of a humor like lobotomy.
I guess so. I guess so. It's one of those things that straddles an interesting edge of like if we if we make him too quippy, does that kind of destroy whatever kind of reality of the film that we're trying to portray? Or does or because it is like a kind of silly, well, not quite summer action blockbuster, but it's a kind of silly action blockbuster that we kind of lean into that and just make him as quippy as possible. Um, and like it is interesting as well because we've not gone into it yet, but Charlie Sheen is obviously the name on the poster. Charlie Sheen is essentially our quote unquote hero. He is our protagonist. But really, the real action hero of the movie is Natasha Kinski's character.
Oh,
Uh,
like, yeah. absolutely like go hot. Like, and I genuinely was like, when what happens in the early stages when like her character, we believe, falls to her death, I was like, oh no, we've lost Natasha Kinski from this movie. Like, and then like when she comes back, I was like, let's go. Like, I think she's like a weirdly captivating screen presence. Like, even films she's not good in. I'm looking at you, One from the Heart. Like, there is something kind of like captivating about her. Yeah, and I think she
Yes.
kind of does this stuff quite well. This kind of like ex KGB, and I'm pretty sure the plot synopsis for this film ruins it. I believe uh
Yeah, yeah. The fact that she's not dead, like that she's a main part of the film, and she is a former KGB agent, or KG used to be, as it's noted in the script. Um,
there, yeah, I'm pretty sure like there is like just blurbs of the film. It's like a skydiver, an ex KGB agent must go against the Russian mob to like get some gold. It's like, well, the gold in this film is kind of held back as well. Like we
yeah,
like we're in Charlie Sheen's character's shoes. We're like, we don't know what it is. At one point, we think it's like something nuclear, and Charlie Sheen's character has to hold the lid to a coffee pot on a plane over his testicles just in case they get fried by all of the radioactive goo.
yes, because that's how you protect yourself against cancer, I guess. Like, yeah, seems very strange. But I would agree with you. I think that like Natasha Kinski is good at this type of character, the kind of mysterious, unknowable
Mm-hmm.
woman. You know, like I think she is very good at that. I do think it is kind of hilarious to think like, could she imagine being in this film? You know, if somebody had walked up to her on the set of Paris, Texas, and said, "In 10 years' time, you will star in a skydiving action film," you know, um, yeah, I think that would have been quite the surprise to her. But no, I think she's really good in this. I really do think that she's kind of the real hero of the movie, and the person who is the most competent throughout the movie. And I know she has to get caught at the last second, you know. So in the kind of last dying minutes of the third act, we have our hero be a hero, you know, because you know, God forbid that he's just like kind of incompetent throughout the movie and have the woman as the real hero. God forbid that. You know, it is 1994 after all. But you know, I think yeah, she really makes an impression throughout the movie, and I think that's kind of what makes the movie fun,
Yeah,
because like I think they have good chemistry, Natasha Kinski and Charlie Sheen, and then on the other side of the thing, you got, you know, Christopher McDonald and James Gandolfini, who spar off each other well. So you've got the two sides kind of equally weighted, and I think that's really, as much as there's daftness around, as much as it is a fairly meat and potatoes action thriller. I think that does give it extra fun. Is those four actors working well off each other?
yeah. And there's some great set pieces in this.
Mm,
Like some of it, like again, and I think both of these films kind of lift stuff wholesale from other movies, whether it is kind of,
sure.
yeah, like whereas like Drop Zone lifts that whole like kind of infiltrating a building, like, do you know what I mean? Like stuff from Die Hard almost, like in the final act. Like this just lifts that like famous shot from Die Hard 2 where like somebody is shot up into the air with an explosion behind them with this like, well, it can only be described, what would you describe that kind of like cart that they ride on? Like what is it? Like a
Well, so it's hard to describe. Obviously, podcasting is an audio medium, and it is quite hard to describe audioly. I'll try and do my best. Basically, um, the this guy in his kind of aircraft hangar has kind of taken the cockpit of like a fighter jet and turned it into like one of those kind of car rockets that the ones that generally attempt like land speed records and stuff. So if you kind of imagine that, it's like a cockpit of a fighter jet that's kind of been converted into a kind of rocket like that, and it's been put on train tracks to ride into a wall because apparently, and this is not discussed uh, at all in the movie. And really, we should go more into this of how spectacularly this guy wanted to commit suicide and how dark that is. But we don't have the bandwidth to get into that in this movie, apparently. um, yes. So that's how I can best describe it, I think.
Yeah, and it's like there is a thing with that where there's like really bad, like kind of shaky slow mo that kind of definitely felt like an afterthought as opposed to like something being filmed in slow motion. And it's kind of like, if anything, that sequence just left me frustrated. It's like, just press the fuck, just flick the fucking switch. Do you know what I mean? It kind of felt like we have to do this at the last moment. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like,
Yeah.
and it's like, I'm pretty sure, like in cuts in the film, it's like his fingers right next to it, and it's like, oh no, we're we're further away, and his finger goes back a bit. It's like that kind of like continuity of a cigarette going up and down between like where they've used different takes, and it's like, come on, he should have flicked that switch about like, I don't know, 100 meters back.
But yeah, I think it's like that, I think it's like that Bond movie thing where you can only defuse the bomb with 2 seconds to go, kind of thing.
One
Like,
hundred.
I think you're right. And I do think that is the sequence when they are going at high speed in this kind of cockpit thing. And when their faces are kind of scraped back and they're going boo and doing all that, I think that is the moment where the movie does get its most kind of like hot shots, because like it just seems so kind of like a parody of an action film. But then yeah, I think it's a but on saying that, I do think at that aircraft hangar, that is one of the best action sequences in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
That shootout that happens there, and
Yeah,
the old guy suddenly appearing with a bazooka and blowing up the car, and like I think that's one of the most fun action sequences in the movie, and I think that like as silly as that bit is, and then you get the ejector sheet thing, and them flying out the fireball and all that, and it's quite a cool image, and it's quite a nice topper to a fun
yeah,
shooter we've just seen. So I, as an action sequence, I think it's still one of the best ones in the film.
yeah. That sequence, and then the kind of like all of the like skydiving stuff at the end of the film, like
Yes.
kind of like yeah, like Natasha Kinski in the boot of a car, and Charlie Sheen hurtling after her. It's real like heart in your throat kind of stuff, and like one thing I will say about these two films, this film felt a lot more practical and not blue screen in the sense of like it they are a lot more clever of just being like, we're going to do a wide shot,
Yeah.
so it doesn't matter if it's Charlie Sheen, whereas Drop Zone will do like a, yeah, we're going to do a close up, but you can clearly see it's Wesley Snipes going, ah, like, and then we're just not showing his bottom half because he's just stood in a room.
I think you're right in that. I think this movie is obviously in both films, because of insurance, nobody did like their own stunts. Apart from apparently Michael Jeter did his stunt, his one skydiving jump, I think, when we're doing the kind of training sequence and when the villains are kind of training him out. But yeah, this movie's a lot more cleverly edited, terminal velocity, because when we are doing a close up, we're not seeing we're not seeing kind of like half of their body or whatever, like we see with like Yancey Butler and Wesley Snipes, where you can see like it's how blue screened it is. We're doing, if we are doing close-ups, we're doing very tight close-ups on just faces.
Yeah.
So you can't really see anything out of the frame other than just a big face. So it does make it feel more real, even though you are obvious part of your logical brain is aware that, like, okay, Natasha Kinski and Charlie Sheen are not doing this, but it gives that little bit of extra trickery and it makes it that little bit more believable. Whereas some of the skydiving sequences in Drop Zone are genuinely laughable.
100%. Yeah, and I think there's quite like tonally, this film does kind of like keep shifting and modulating like throughout, and it's like there's part of me is like, is this for the better or like for the worse of the film? Do you know what I mean? Because we kind of like go from like you said, that fun action sequence that ends in like a big fireball, and then it is just kind of this like heart to heart, very kind of like it does feel like it is kind of, are we going action, are we going thriller? And it's like, let's just try and have our cake and eat it with this one. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like kind of, let's just do both. Let's just do both. And like, if one of them is like all of a sudden you're getting kind of whiplash where it's like, now we've got to be serious, despite the fact we've just had a very silly scene. Do you know what I mean? Or like, we got to get really serious after we've had Charlie Sheen go down like a big chimney into like a vat of like dust and then comes out like with a pigeon there. Yeah, covered in soot.
Covered in soot, like he's in like he's in Mary Poppins. Like it's that, and like really comically covered in soot. I know what you mean, because like I feel like they're not quite sure how far to like push to the kind of comedic elements as well, because like you say, we go from like this big daft action sequence to like this heart to heart between Natasha Kinski's and Charlie Sheen's character. But that heart to heart is capped by um, them drinking tequila together, and she accidentally drinks the worm that's in the bottom of the tequila bottle. And then he goes, "Oh no, no, you shouldn't have swallowed that." And she answers, "Oh, I've been trained to swallow a lot of things." And he goes, "Oh, stop! I'll have to marry you." Which is like, I mean, even even Roger Moore might pass on that line. Like, and this, this, this line, this exchange comes just after an incredibly depressing tale about how much he misses her family in Russia.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. I was really confused with this film in general as well, being like, what is the kind of like politics of this film? Like, what is it kind of what is it saying about
Mm.
Russia? Do you know what I mean? Like, and like trying to think like, where was the kind of like relations between America and Russia in '94? I'm not sure if you like know
Um,
that better than I do. Like, it always
I mean,
feels like they've always been on
I mean,
shaky ground.
always on shaky ground. I feel like in '94, obviously, Berlin Wall would have came down in '89. Yeltsin would have been in power. Probably it would have been it would probably been kind of trying to get a bit better. But that kind of mid '90s period, I feel like is probably it starts to get further. Once Putin takes power in '99, I think it starts to get further away again. But I do think in kind of that period, it's about as close as you're going to get between kind of America and Russia. I would say as they're trying to convince them to be more capitalist and try and massage them in a certain direction. I think it would probably be the closest.
It's just dawned on me now that this film tries to even borrow from the Rocky Four playbook as well. It's like
True.
all it can take is one man to settle the beef between the US and Russia. All it's going to take is one man who desperately in his younger years wanted some Russian gold, but because of a bloody boycott, couldn't go to the Olympics.
That is that is such a weird subplot that, like, so listeners who maybe not seen this movie, basically it turns out that when Charlie Sheen's character was 16 or 17, he was a gymnast, and apparently a very good gymnast that was good enough to qualify for the Olympics, but sadly could not go to the Olympics because the Olympics he was going to go to was the 1980 Olympics, which was in Moscow, which was famously boycotted by America and a few other countries, West Germany and I can't remember a couple others. But not the UK, because that's why Scottish runner Alan Wells won the 100 meters.
Take it where we can. Take it where we can.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Scotland has so little sporting success. We will. Well, it doesn't. I literally do not care that the Americans weren't there.
Do what you want, Russia. We'll just come for the gold.
Um. So yes. You know, any sporting success that Scotland gets is much talked up. So that's why we know all the sporting success because it's short list. You know. Anyway, moving on from Scottish sports. Like yeah, it's just such a random subplot. I don't know why they have it there. Literally, they only have it there for that end gag where he gets like a kind of medal of honor for like saving Russian society, I guess. Like it's just like, yay. Like we got our gold back, I guess. I mean I'm assuming they got their gold back, yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. There is kind of, it is one of those films, the more you think about it, the more it probably falls apart. Do
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
sure.
Like,
Yeah.
in the moment, it's like, yeah, it's kind of like all of the time that you kind of go, oh, I don't know. Is this film losing me? Is this film losing me? They kind of do pull it back with like a kind of like a half decent to decent, like action sequence or kind of like bit of business where you go, oh, no, I'm kind of digging this. Like whether it's the kind of like, like the reveal of Natasha Kinski being alive again. Like I found all that stuff like very convenient within the plot as well, because like it's just at the moment where because when she is on the plane, she says, "Did you see?" Like when she's going to do a skydive, did you see another plane? And that's when he goes to talk to Melvin Van Peebles, and then like turns around and she's gone, and then like we see as the audience like him hurtling after her, and then she hits terminal velocity and she gone, or what he suspects. And then when he's watching the tape back, he's like, there was another plane. And then like literally that second there is a plane outside, and like he just hops on a motorbike and goes after it. It's like, this feels very convenient, but it's also a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, absolutely. There's a lot of plot convenience like that. And like you say, the more you think about it, the more it kind of you're like, why do these things happen? Because like when she reveals that she's still alive, she's like, huh, you know, you know, she basically says that she's surprised it took him so long to, you know, to figure it all out. And I was like, but why do you want them to be like? He's not showing himself to be like a super stealth agent or anything. Why do you want him to be part of your plan? Why do you want his help? Like other than like the subterfuge of blaming the death on him and then like kind of exonerating him because she's a good person. But like, why do you want him along for the ride? You know, like he's just a skydiving instructor. He's not like got any military or law enforcement training.
Yeah.
He's you know like nothing. He's got no kind of action espionage skills. So you know,
And it kind of
rides along
feels
for the mission.
like if you're going to like recruit someone to be a part of your secret team,
Yeah,
maybe don't recruit somebody who is like potentially under investigation for gross negligence and manslaughter. because at some point the authorities may come to look for him.
It's a fair point. Yeah. Mm.
And there's like the whole thing like, how did he believe that like James Gandolfini's character was like a DEA? How did he believe that when he's like, oh, yeah, I just broke into her apartment? Do you know what I mean? Like, and he's fine about it. He's like, yeah, we'll let that go because you might have some more information for me. It's like, surely that would be just enough to be like, something a bit
Yeah.
shifty here.
Something a bit strange going on. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of kind of random bits in this movie as well. You know, like one of the kind of funny scenes is just before you see James Gandolfini's like heel turn, like when he reveals that he is not just the assistant DA, he is actually like a Russian gangster. You know, like he there's a weird moment just before that where he is standing next to the car with Charlie Sheen as Natasha Skinsky and her assistant Lex, I think his name is. Like they land and then they're like, shall we go over to the plane, will they come to us, and they have this discussion, but while they're waiting for him, he's just crunching on some certs, like a breath mint, and then he offers Charlie Sheen a certs, and Charlie Sheen's is like, I don't know if I want it. He's like, go on, and then so Charlie Sheen, and it seems like for quite a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, it's only probably like 30 seconds of screen time, but still, it seems like there's like this weird pause in the movie where we're just watching James Gandolfini and Charlie Sheen crunching on breath mints.
Yeah. Yeah. There are small moments where I'm like, okay, like, is there like what is this bit of business? Like the whole thing when he's going through her apartment and like he's just going through her records and she's got like, loads of Bruce Springsteen albums. He's like, a Boss fan, before he gets like smashed with like the lid of a cistern,
Yeah,
like from a
by Christopher
toilet.
McDonald. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah, and it's like, did like, I don't know, did the label like, is this like something to like get some money back for the film, being like, yeah, we're gonna go after Bruce Springsteen's record label, just be like,
Yeah. I don't know who.
maybe
Yeah, maybe
maybe it would jog people's memory. Yeah,
may,
The River, that is a great album. Yeah, I need to pick that up.
I don't know what Bruce would be on at that time, but yeah, I don't like or maybe the soundtrack was done by the same label or something. It's like, yeah, okay, we gotta get a kickback from RCA or whatever label. I'm not sure what
Yeah,
label he was on, but like something like that, something like that. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a weird song. It's a weird kind of random moment. So there is kind of weird random moments like that. Actually, mentioning the soundtrack as well, I noticed that on the soundtrack there was a song called "This Cowboy Song" by Sting, and I'm starting to feel like Sting is the ultimate '90s action guy on the soundtrack, because like this is like he's on this soundtrack. He does the closing credits for Leon. He does the closing credits for Demolition Man, and also, along with Brian Adams and Rod Stewart, did the theme song for Disney's Three Musketeers, which came out in '93. So this is like the fourth film we've covered on the podcast that has Sting on the soundtrack. Like, what is this? What, like, did Sting have some hotline to like being on action movie soundtracks in the '90s? Like, I'm not sure, but like, I'm encountering a lot of Sting on this journey covering '90s action movies.
All Sting was doing in the 90s was having tantric sex and writing songs for 90s action movies. I could think of worse ways to spend the 90s, or
Uh,
any decade for that
yeah, that's
instance.
true. It's a decent decade. It was a decent decade for Sting, and fair play to him. Yeah, yeah. But I just noticed that and I was like, Jesus Christ, how many more movies am I going to encounter that has Sting on the soundtrack? Um, yeah. We'll keep. I'll keep people informed. I did read that he was on this. We've not covered Lethal Weapon 3, but apparently he's on the soundtrack for Lethal Weapon 3 as well. So that's at least one other that we've got to tick
There
off
you
the
go.
list. Yeah. Oh.
Be there on Hot Sting Watch.
All the Sting fans coming to the podcast for more Sting talk. Yeah, yeah. For sure. I guess there's like a crossover audience of like me being a wrestling fan. Some of the other people that listen to the podcast know are wrestling fans. So we got to confirm which Sting it is. When we get when we get into Sting talk. Just to clarify, the Geordie musician Sting, um, who, who doesn't have a Geordie accent. Weird. Um, Maybe he's one of those people who just has the accent like when he's in Newcastle. Like you know how some people like their accent changes when they go
Yeah.
back home. Like maybe he goes broad Geordie when he goes back to Newcastle.
Yeah, all of a sudden he's like, wait, hey man, don't stick so close to me.
uh, yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. So
Wait, hey, I got a message in a bottle. Hey, hey. Yeah.
imagine if he sung all his Imagine if he sung all his songs the way that Jimmy Neal sings songs. Like
Oh,
like that would be that would be hilarious.
I can't. The Geordie accent escapes me. I go, why I? Like,
The only thing, and this really marks my age, is like the way I get into a Geordie accent is PG. I'm blind. which is
yep.
um, which is a very old Biker Grove reference that half our audience who are American will not get, and anybody who's under the age of 35 probably wouldn't get either. But it amuses me, so like that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. Just satisfying, self-indulgent. This podcast is self-indulgent, and that's why we are as obscure as we are. Yeah. Yeah, yes. But I guess like that kind of we'll kind of wrap up kind of terminal velocity there and kind of finish up part two there as we've kind of sidetracked into Sting talk. So that's where that we might need to segue into part three. Right. So in this final part, we do the kind of head-to-head section where we kind of compare and contrast these two films. And we're going to do kind of three main categories, and maybe some mini categories. So like we'll do best action star, best action, and best film kind of overall. But like I say, after best action star and best action, we might do a couple of mini categories, kind of quick fire, see what you think. All right. So first we'll go to action star. Whether what Snipes or Sheen? That's what we're talking about here.
I think out and out, it's got to be Snipes for me. Like in the fact that he's got everything you want from an action star. Like obviously can definitely handle himself. As I said earlier when we talk about terminal velocity, Snipes kind of has that thing where he feels like he's straddling the like generations between action stars, where like he is very much like a 90s quantity as an action star, at least from what I've seen. Like, do you know what I mean? And I don't feel like he did enough in action. And just these films apart as well. It's like these films kind of isolated is Sheen just feels like that kind of stunt casty 90s thing of being like, we need people who aren't action stars to lead these action vehicles because of the success of like Speed or The Hangover from Die Hard. Do you know what I mean? Everything is kind of Die Hard honor, which is like a kind of subgenre unto itself. Whereas Wesley Snipes just kind of has this like cool charisma that is kind of inherently watchable. So much so that like Drop Zone is a like full out 2-star movie, but kind of like on Letterboxd gets a heart because it's like, Wesley Snipes is a charismatic motherfucker. He's like equally kind of action. He's sexy. He's kind of like really cool. It's yeah. He's kind of got, I don't know, a lot of stuff going for him. Whereas I don't know, Charlie Sheen. Yeah, as I said, just feels like this kind of, he's there to serve a wider purpose within Hollywood of just being like, this is the de rigueur thing to do at the time, of just having these people who are like, you know, this guy for this thing. Well, now he's doing this.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, obviously Snipes had like a much longer, is much more associated with action. Like Charlie Sheen really wasn't in action all that much. I mean, this is kind of towards the tail end, I would say, of his kind of action run, which you could kind of say kind of starts in like '88 with Young Guns, and then he's in like a few action movies right at the start of the '90s, Navy SEALs, The Rookie. He's in one called The Chase, which came out the same year as this, '94, and then obviously he's in the Hot Shot movies, which are obviously parody spoofs of action movies. But like, so he literally, and this is kind of the tail end of it, is like his action run. And I think you're right that like Snipes is way more charismatic. He's got way more screen presence. He is, and you're right about that thing of like, because he is a legitimate martial artist. He's trained in a lot of martial arts, um, and you can kind of tell that he does straddle the kind of the old paradigm, the Arnie and Sly Superman paradigm, uh, along with the kind of Reeves and Cage kind of everyman kind of paradigm
Yeah.
of an action hero. So no, I think I absolutely agree, and yeah, I think it's a pretty easy win for Snipes. Sheen is not bad in his role, and I guess like if we're just isolating these two films as well, like uh, Snipes is a legitimate action hero in his movie, whereas Sheen's character kind of isn't an action hero. He's the man over his head. Like we talked about, like you mentioned Blowout. I was talking about the kind of Hitchcock thrillers. Like so. I guess his character is not even supposed to really be an action hero in the same way, even though he's got to do his kind of last minute save the day kind of stuff
Yeah.
like an action hero. Um,
I think the ultimate test on this is which one of them ended up in the Expendables franchise, and it's Wesley Snipes, right? Expendables 3. Charlie Sheen, not seen in any of it, not seen in all four of them, even the dreadful fourth one.
yeah, that's true. That's true because like I guess like Charlie Sheen is, I mean, I don't know what like I mean apart from being I don't know quote unquote cancelled at various stages for his many problematic behaviors. Outside of that, which probably wouldn't bother Sly or so I don't think that would be a major obstacle because Seagal was offered at one stage and turned it down, so like that wouldn't be a major obstacle in that franchise. But yeah, I guess like he's just not associated with action. Like people associate him with the Hot Shot movies, with Two and a Half Men, with comedy. They don't associate him with action at all nowadays. So people might think it was strange him turning up, and people probably have to be reminded that he had like a short run of action movies, from the late '80s into the kind of mid '90s.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and Snipes absolutely. Snipes and Antonio Banderas absolutely steal Expendables 3. Just on a quick side note. So like, yeah, it's kind of the only good parts of that movie. But yeah, I think it's a very easy win for Snipes. I don't think it's much of a conversation. Sheen is passable in his role, but Snipes really brings his A game to a pretty rubbish movie, which kind of elevates it. Yeah, for sure. So I guess that was a pretty quick discussion on that one. We move across to the actual action in the movie, and I think this is a much closer contested contest than the opening contest.
Yeah, this one does get a bit more like, because I think some of it comes down to like filmmaking technique as well, and obviously like Drop Zone was John Badham very much just fucking cashing a check. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, gone were the days of him making Saturday Night Fever. Is now just like, you got a script, yeah, I'll direct it. And I think like the kind of shortcomings of Drop Zone are, like I mentioned earlier, like the kind of blue screen stuff. Whereas like Terminal Velocity, a lot of the action looks very slick and like has those moments where it is kind of like heart in your throat. Whereas Drop Zone feels like a lot of it is played, I don't know, quite campy and silly. Do you know what I mean? Even like to the first time that Wesley Snipes does a skydive, where it's like they open a trap door out of the bottom of the plane and he kind of falls through. It is kind of a bit like, I don't know, like, and we like mentioned like that fight scene where it is kind of like should be someone playing a tuba, and there's like yeah, all in all throughout Drop Zone, I'm just like, this is the thing of you making me watch two films that involve a lot of skydiving. Like they kind of do start to merge together.
Sure, of
Um,
course.
but action sequence wise, I don't know. I just think that Terminal Velocity pips it to the post just because the action within it makes logical sense, like most of the time. Whereas, like, Drop Zone, like, yeah, like you got the action sequence on the plane at the beginning, but like you just have the questions of, like, huh? How did they? How did they arrange all of this? Like, so this is the setup for what their actual thing is, but this feels like it would have taken way much more like planning and subterfuge than like breaking into the DEA, like getting all these guns on the plane, like, do you know what I mean, getting explosives and stuff like that to be able to blow a hole in the side of it. Whereas like Terminal Velocity, yeah, like it's kind of got that amazing like early sequence where like you believe that Natasha Kinsey's character is dead. Like you have kind of heart in your throat moment of the car falling through the sky, and then like, can he get the can he get the key in the boot, and then even when he saved her, like, are they going to be like shredded by wind turbines? Do you know what I mean? It is kind of like one thing after another within that action sequence. It, it is a lot of fun. It is like, yeah, a great shootout into just like something where it's like, fuck it, they're going on this like rocket on a train track that is going to like end in a fiery fireball. Like, yeah, let's go.
Big
So
explosion.
I don't know. Like, as much as it is, it could be a tight race, and maybe you'll remind me of some stuff, and I'll be like, yeah, it is a tighter race than I thought it was. Um, it feels like terminal velocity, and it might be recency bias because that's the one I watched last. Is it feels like all the action in it is a lot more slick and like heart pumping than it is in Drop Zone.
I would probably agree with that actually. There is some good moments in Drop Zone,
Yep.
obviously, but like you say, I think that even the kind of most fun action moments, like the hijacking of the plane, like it is all, and I'm all for over the top action, but like, yeah, it's all done in a kind of quite cartoony way, and it's funny because like going into both of these films, it a long time since I'd seen them. I had kind of remembered like Drop Zone being like the slightly better one, and obviously on paper, like you would think that this is going to be more slickly directed. I mean, like I said, Darren Serafian is a safe pair of hands. He's obviously directed shitloads of television. He's not like a really famous like film director, but he's obviously a solid enough director. But John Badham has a way more impressive CV. Um, and I do wonder, and I don't want to downplay Darren Serafian's kind of contribution. He directed the film, so like I'm sure he played the big part. But I do wonder if the fact that the action is kind of slightly slicker, or looks slightly slicker in the Terminal Velocity, is the director of photography on Terminal Velocity is a guy called Oliver Wood, who also was the director of photography on the likes of Die Hard 2 and the all three of the first of the original Bourne trilogy. Um,
Oh,
so like this guy, and he's been director of photography on a number of other action movies, and I wonder if that makes a difference as well. Like I say, I'm sure Darren Zarafian played his part and did his job well, but I wonder if that's why the action looks tighter and slicker because we've got like a cinematographer who really knows the genre, and that doesn't take anything away from the cinematographer on um, Drop Zone, who Roy H. Wagner, who worked with John Badham a few times. I'm sure he's decent as well. But like, I think maybe that might be part of what makes the difference. And also, like, the most memorable in terms of pure action, I think the most memorable sequence in Drop Zone is the initial hijacking, and then I guess like the end sequence as well, because like we didn't mention when talking about Drop Zone that like um Gary Busey's villain has like a very entertainingly over the top villain death. Where he comes off the building and then he like glides straight through the windscreen
oh,
of of one of his henchmen. So he has a peach of a death. It's like it's up there with the best 90 action villain deaths. So like I would say that it's got a couple of action highs, but I think that it's not as memorable as the big shootout and escape that we get in Terminal Velocity, and that like final like that kind of climactic action sequence where like he's trying to get Natasha Kinski out the boot from the falling Cadillac. So yeah, I think that like I think it's just tighter edited, it's slicker shot, and I think overall the action sequences in Terminal Velocity are a bit more impactful, even though there is some fun ones in Drop Zone as well.
yeah. And I think it's that thing like when it when it counts, like that final kind of like what you're going to be left with from the film action sequence. The one in Terminal Velocity is in the day, so it's like bright, it's bold. Whereas like all the kind of like wrapping up stuff in Drop Zone is all at night, so they can kind of like, do you know what I mean? It's not kind of as like in your face as like seeing a car falling through the sky like over the desert. Do you know what I mean? Like that is kind of a bit more breathtaking than like blue screen Gary Busey going, and then kind of like, do you know what I mean? He kind of changed direction more times than the magic bullet in the JFK shooting. Do you know what I mean? Like in the kind of like he's going like vertical to horizontal to all of a sudden moving horizontally in the air to like just for the sake of like, yeah, we need him to go through this windscreen so we can take out it serves the plot. Do you know what I mean? We need to take out the goon as well. We need to take out Juice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, and I guess like we'll do a couple other quick ones before we discover what the best overall movie is. So we'll go for best leading lady between Kinski and Butler.
Oh, Um, Again, I think it comes down to like like the slickness. I think it is Natasha Kinski because she gets a lot more to do, and there's like kind of like a lot more to her character than her just being like, I don't know, a part of like she doesn't feel as much as a plot device per se as Yancy Butler does. Do you know what I mean? Like she's kind of like, I don't know, like a mission giver in a Grand Theft Auto game, like Yancy Butler, as opposed to like Natasha Kinski is like basically she's second billing in the film. Like she is very much like the kind of like, and as you said earlier, like is the kind of action heart of the film. Like whereas Charlie Sheen is like taken along for the ride.
Yeah, because I mean, she's the one who's mainly doing the kind of actiony, kind of espionage kind of stuff, and he's just there to be like, huh, what's going on now? Oh,
Yeah,
okay, oh, you know,
like
like
head
that.
scratching. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So she is kind of almost um less of like a supporting leading lady and more of a kind of co-lead almost, you know,
yeah.
like so yeah, whereas while Yancy Butler does well in her role, it is kind of like, um, yeah, like you say, it is more of a kind of plot device. We need her there to train Snipes up in skydiving. We need her there to be, a bit quippy. It's it's written in that kind of very kind of action movie style of like, at least she's not like a kind of damsel in distress cliche, but she
Yes,
is the
yeah.
kind of ballsy woman cliche, which is it's still a cliche, but maybe a slightly better cliche.
I,
Um,
I think that's what's good about both the films is
mhm.
neither of them are like damsels in distress. They have
That's true.
agency and they have like, do you know what I mean? Like both of like, yeah, Yancy Butler, like she stows upon um Ty Moncrief's plane and is like willing to like confronts them. It's not like she's just kind of like, it does get a bit damsel and distressy, but that is because she is like been a hard ass.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? It's the same as like your kind of like male lead in a film having to be picked up by their like co-lead, like kind of rescued. It isn't like that thing of like, oh, save me. It's that kind of like that I've been trying to like, do you know what I mean? Like get the wheels in motion to fuck these guys up as well.
yes, because like there is a moment where you think it's going to go in that direction, where the villain team sabotage her parachute rig, and at that moment
Yes.
you think she's going to get kidnapped, and we're going to have that kind of like third act. We've got to get got to get the girl, kind of thing. Um, I think that like that's maybe just kind of lucky happenstance in the fact that it was the part was originally written for a male, and so like it was when it was retailed for a female, it was just they didn't retool it, go all that way
Yes.
to reel it to it as a kind of stereotypical female kind of leading lady of the time. Which is, yeah, I think it's good for the film that they just kind of essentially kept the same character. It just happens to be played by a woman. And I think it's kind of good on them for doing that. And it's pretty, yeah, it's pretty progressive move in '94. So like it's yeah, points for them. So I think the next one would be best villains. Who are the best villains?
Oh, it's difficult, isn't it? Like, she is good. BC is good. Um, I don't know. I just think because of like the hill turn in Terminal Velocity, James Gandolfini, even though like you don't really like after that point, you don't really get like he's not got that much screen time. Like you don't really like
Yeah.
fully understand. Like I don't think either of them you fully understand why they're doing it. You just understand Ty Moncrief's like plan a bit better. Like, do you know what I mean? And the fact that like this is what he wants, whereas like in Terminal Velocity, it's like they're just mobsters, so they're bad. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel like they. I don't know. They have like some kind of. They want the money. They want the gold for the sake of having the gold.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like Time on Creef and his gang is just like, yeah, might again after the money, but like the film takes like steps to like go through their plan and like set it all up and like what they're going to do with the information they get and like I don't know. I think some of it comes down to the fact I really like the performances of James Gandolfini and Shooter McGavin. So maybe those two. I don't know. It's difficult. It's difficult.
It's a I would say it's a very close call, and it's interesting that both sets of villains, they kind of do the same thing, and they don't, and like you say, they don't really explore the motivations of the villains, because both sets of villains, Busey is a former DEA agent turned criminal,
Yeah.
and the other sets of villains, Gandolfini and Shooter McGavin, are former KGB agents turned mafia members. Like that.
Yes.
So there, and like, and that those heel turns are not like kind of explained of like they could have given a bit more meat on the bone of like, oh, I've been working for the government for so long,
Yeah.
and all I've got is this pittance in this shitty apartment, and and that's why I'm going to throw my lot in with the criminals who live better lifestyles. And you could do any kind of like cheap kind of thing around that, that give just a little bit more meat in the bone for that. But they neither of them really explore that at all in either film.
I think it's like just that hangover from that whole Die Hard thing where like Hans Gruber like goes throughout the film like making it out like he's this kind of like righteous guy who has this like do you know what I mean? He's doing it for all these reasons and it's like not at all. He's just there to steal the like still is it diamonds or whatever? Do you know what I mean? It's
Yes,
like
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's like they're not
He's
these
just a
kind of
thief in
like
the end. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, they're not these big political things, but they're kind of they skip all the things that make that interesting. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
the first time you get that reveal in a film, it's like, yeah, great. Whereas it's not really played for reveals in this. It's just kind of like um not giving the audience context for the characters. It's like, oh, okay. I don't really like I don't really know what's going on here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They're just dirty law enforcement. They just,
It's bad.
they're
It's
just
bad.
bad.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
just bad. They're just bad. They fought for good once, but like then they turned bad, and now they're just
Yeah.
evil. So that's them. Yeah, I think you're right. I think like the little things, the little touches that they give, that Gandolfini gives, and even like Christopher McDonald gives, and like his like get up, his like bottle bleached blonde hair and leather jacket and all that is like he just looks fun, as well as a villain. So
Well, and he does the whole performance done up to 11, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't think Christopher McDonald speaks an entire line. He just screams everything. Like,
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, like, and it's particularly great where, like, he, we discussed that scene where Charlie Sheen comes down the chimney and all that, and then when he bursts into the that factory and realize the electric fence has been turned off, and he's just shouting at the other henchmen to,
yeah,
like, ah, like it's hilarious, like it's really fun. So like, yeah, I think I might give the slight edge to the Gandolfini McDonald combo,
yeah.
over Busey, who is also very up to 11 and very fun, as Busey always is, up to 11 that is. Um but yeah, I'll give the slight edge to them. So that's So we're currently at 3-1 to terminal velocity. Um, I guess I'm trying to think like yeah, that's probably the categories covered. I guess the other thing is like we'll go on the we'll do one last one before best overall film. What did you think is the best score? Did you prefer the blaring blues guitar of Hans Zimmer on Drop Zone, or the I can't remember who the composer on Terminal Velocity is, but it's much more. It's done in a much more kind of big horns, brassy kind of almost Bond like kind of score in Terminal Velocity.
The Joel McNeely score for
Joel
Terminal
McNeely,
Velocity,
that's
is
his
it?
name. Yeah,
Um,
didn't look it up quick enough. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I think the Drop Zone one stuck in my mind longer, just because it was a lot of like wailing guitars and stuff like that. Yeah, like I, I think Drop Zone might have to take it. Just like I don't know, like. But then again, like the terminal velocity one probably does its job because you don't notice it, and sometimes that's like the job of a great score is like it's not kind of like up front and center. Um, I don't know. This is a difficult one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that like maybe you don't notice the maybe you don't notice the terminal velocity score as much because it's a very it plays very close to the rule book. It's a very
Yes.
classic suspense thriller score, you know, that you've heard on a lot of suspense. So
Yeah.
it doesn't stand out from a lot of other scores that you've heard from other kind of thrillers. So I guess and because the drop zone score is such a kind of time capsule early
Bombastic.
90s
Yeah.
action, like it maybe stands out more. And
100%. 100%.
I think I'm like you. I think I might go towards Drop Zone because, like, particularly because, like, I have this podcast and I watch a lot of 90s action movies, and it's got that kind of nostalgia feel to it, and
Yeah.
it's very time capsule. I think I'm going to have to give the nod to Drop Zone and the legend that is Hans Zimmer, a very different mode of Hans Zimmer that we're not not used to.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I feel like Hans Zimmer in like I feel like there's a few composers who like really like surprise you. And like I think try to think one of the like Danny Elfman's Midnight Run score is
Yeah,
like one
that's
of those
true.
ones where you're like, this is Danny Elfman? Do you know what I mean? Like I think that's like one with lots of wailing sax, isn't it? Like they just
Yeah,
like
that's
both of them
true.
had like this one score in them where it's like, I just really need to have all this wailing guitar, and like Danny Elfman's like, we just need loads of saxophone, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, no, there. I guess like you have like ones like that where you're like, huh, like it's like
Yeah.
you know, like it surprises me that like the like Ennio Morricone did the score for the thing. You know, it's like, oh, okay, all right,
Yeah.
yeah,
The
fair
the
play.
the, the which I think was only because they wouldn't let John Carpenter do it, and then Ennio Morricone was like, "Yeah, I just basically like did what I thought you would do." That's why
Yeah,
it's like nothing like an Ennio Morricone score.
because you listen to it and you're like, and Ennio Morricone did this.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
Ennio
yeah, yeah.
Morricone. Yeah, yeah, he did.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
not a squelchy synths. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I guess everybody has that in their locker. Like, I guess particularly when you're like Morricone, who's like scored like I don't know, like 400 films or whatever. He's a ridiculous man. But like,
yeah.
yeah, hats off to the late great Ennio Morricone. But like, yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you always get these ones that are like the surprise in the composer's kind of discography. Yeah. In terms of their film scores. Um, so yes, so we're now up to so we've agreed so we've both agreed on all the categories. We've agreed on all the categories so far. So we're at 3-2 terminal velocity. So we're just down to the final decider. What overall do you think is and we need to put the clarification in that obviously neither of these are good films. But what
Mm-hmm.
overall do you think is the better film or To maybe put it another way, the most entertaining of the two.
The most entertaining of the two. See, despite all of the categories, like most of them being won by terminal velocity, I'm trying to think of what is the film that I would rewatch quicker. And I genuinely think, just for the sheer like kind of audacity of it, and like the amount of like kind of like borrowing from like other stuff that it does so liberally, and like how much it shifts and moves and like kind of cram stuff into it. I think I'm gonna watch Drop Zone before I watch Terminal Velocity again, just because like for me, Terminal Velocity does a thing where it gives the promise of being a better film than it is, whereas like Drop Zone kind of like is what it is and like sticks to it, whereas like there's almost like a disappointment factor to Terminal Velocity where it's like it looks really good, it's got some really great talent in there, but doesn't quite like get to the heights that it should do. Like it should be a hard 3-star movie, but doesn't quite get there. Like it falls short. Whereas like Drop Zone is a hard 2-star movie, but doesn't try and be anything more in a way. I'm sure that's not what the executives at Paramount wanted, but like
Sure, not. Yeah.
it kind of, I don't know, it, the like all of the parts add up to the whole, whereas like I don't know, yeah, like the whole is better, like, whereas Terminal Velocity, it's got a lot of parts that are great, but I don't think the whole kind of holds up as much.
Okay. Okay. That is a perfectly decent argument. I think they're of like a similar level.
Mhm.
Um, I think so. And I've gone back and forth on this. I mean, initially, when I rated it on Letterbox, I rated Terminal Velocity slightly higher. I gave Drop Zone 2 stars with a heart, and I gave Terminal Velocity 2.5 stars with a heart. Um, so I did, but I've kind of gone back and forth on that whether to bump, like whether to drop Terminal Velocity down to 2 stars with a heart. Like I'm not sure. Um, I think what it comes down for me is that, and you know, obviously expectations play a part in your movie
Yes.
watching experience. So because I am a much bigger Wesley Snipes fan than I am a Charlie Sheen fan, and because I had kind of remembered Drop Zone being the better movie, um, like I felt like I ended up being kind of almost lighter on Terminal Velocity than I was on Drop Zone. So that does play a part. The expectation of like assuming that I was going to name Drop Zone the winner, um, and then the other thing is I think overall, while the terminal velocity has many flaws, it doesn't kind of make sense. As we discussed, the some other things could be explained better in terms of like the villain's motivations, anybody's character motivations, why Charlie Sheen was brought along in this mission anyway. There is a number of like and we didn't really kind of get into the fact that Charlie Sheen's character is a real sleaze to start with, and like
Oh,
some
massively,
so so
massively.
some of the sexist humor is very very outdated now.
Mm.
However, I do think that Terminal Velocity nudges it for me, and I think the main reason for that is like I think that as daft as it is, as silly as it is, it's suspenseful and pretty exciting throughout the movie. And like tonally, it might not be consistent, but pacing wise, it is consistent. It's
Yeah,
paced pretty well. Whereas I like the summer camp section in the second act of Drop Zone. I think is a bit of a slog.
yeah.
Really slows down the movie to a kind of treacly level, and I think that's what edges it for me. Just just really kind of it being terminal velocity being slightly sharper edited, slightly the cinematography being slightly more impactful to me, and the pacing being better than Drop Zone.
What I will say about both of the films
Yeah.
is and I commend them for is both 100 minutes long.
Yes.
Like 101, 102 minutes long. Bring that back. An hour 40. A great length for a film. A
Perfect.
great, like, both of these films, if they were made today, 2 hours 10,
Yeah.
2 hours 20, don't need to be. 1 hour 40, a great length for a film.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree, and I'm absolutely not one of these people who thinks that every movie needs to be between 90 and 100 minutes.
No.
There's plenty of long movies that I enjoy, but
Yeah.
there is a lot, and particularly in kind of the summer blockbuster kind of realm, the action blockbuster realm, there is a lot of movies that, like you say, are 130 minutes, 140 minutes, and absolutely could easily take 30 to 40 minutes out of that.
Yeah.
Like there's plenty of padding in those movies where it's clearly been decided most Marvel movies are like 2.5 hours. We need to be at least 130. And it's like, no, you don't. You absolutely
No.
do not. If you only have hundreds of minutes of story, just just tell a
Yeah.
100-minute film. Don't fill it out with like half an hour of subplots that we don't care about. Yeah.
You got a 100-page script. Fucking give us that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do not give us any more. Do not. Yeah. That's what I like. And I feel like it is a relic of that time. And I am like you. I love a long film. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if I got the choice, am I watching the theatrical cut of JFK, or am I watching the director's cut? Director's cut every time, baby. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll take a 3.5 hour long film any day of the week. But at the same time, a film like this, it feels like both of them know their place, and it's like, not going to overstay our welcome. We're just going to have a fun romp for an hour and 40, and both of them are very much that. They're naff fun romps.
Yeah. Absolutely. So that's it. That's it for those two films. That's it for this year on the podcast. Thanks very much for joining me on this one, Petros, and thanks for taking a risk. I mean, kudos to you. We have covered on this podcast this year. We have covered classics like Speed, like Leon, like True Lies, like The Crow, even things like Clear and Present Danger, which you covered on Again Dafoe. Like we've covered a lot of high level, top grade action stuff, and you came on this episode where you had to do double the homework for two movies you hadn't heard of, and neither of which are good.
Hey, I'm God loves a trier, right? That's what I am. I will be here just to mop up the slop. That's I'm happy to do that. And like, hey, I feel like they've enriched my life. I've had fun for the runtime of these movies, and had fun on this podcast. So that's all I can ask for sometimes.
So before we head on out, just once again, give us all your plugs. Plug, Caged In, plug again before you, and just anything else you want to give a shout out to.
So yeah, listen to Caged In, which is Caged In Pod on all the socials, and you can find that wherever you listen to podcasts. It's currently on an extended hiatus at the moment, because what I like to do sometimes is just take a little break from that podcast, let everything build up, and then come back with a renewed love for it. The thing that has kind of taken over my heart at the moment is getting Dafoe, which is a lot of fun. And obviously I'm the second man on that podcast, so don't have to do all the heavy lifting, which I'm finding a lot of fun. So that is, Dafoe Pod on all the socials, and again can be found wherever you find all good podcasts. And yeah, come listen to season 4, which should be out by now, unless me and Daryl truly fucked up somewhere down the line. And join us moving forward as we kind of, cover all the highs, all the lows, and everything. Willem Dafoe on that pod. And apart from that, just follow follow on the socials, and I have nothing else to plug because I'm a pretty boring man who just watches films all the time.
That's exactly the same with us. So, if you want to follow all 90s action all the time, you can. We've got a Facebook page. We've still got an X, Twitter, well, whatever you want to call it, page, which you can follow at 90s action. You can check us out pretty much wherever podcasts are provided. I think most people listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, but we're on a number of other platforms as well. And that, yeah, like I say, that's it for this episode. That's it for this year. But don't worry, we will come back in 2025 in our traditional style with January, where we will be looking at the Jackie Chan classic that is Rumble in the Bronx. So join us for that in the new year. Until then, though, see ya.